Music is certainly the food of love. If there is one mode of cultural expression that binds us together as a nation and as citizens of the world, it is our shared musical heritage. How does music reveal our essential oneness, our common inheritance as emotional beings? How do different traditions come together to create a rich mosaic that belongs to all of us across countries and creed? Two of our greatest exponents, Sri Zakir Hussain and Sri T.M. Krishna, come together to share their journeys, experiences, experiments, questions, and quests. It is a privilege to have you both on the program. We look forward to an enriching give and take that will open us doors of our minds and help us appreciate the hidden strains of music.
Thank you, Amy and Sangeeta. Good evening, everyone. JSW presents the Anil Dharker Literature Live Independence Lecture 2021. The concluding session of the two-part series of Independence Lectures is titled The Unifying Force of Music in India and the World. As Plato said, music gives soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and life to everything. Joining us this evening are two of India's most renowned musicians, tabla maestro, guru, exponent of Hindustani classical music, and world musician Ustad Zakir Hussain, and Carnatic singer, musician, and activist T.M. Krishna. So sit back and enjoy what promises to be an evening of celebration. Over to you, Zakir ji and Krishna ji.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, Zakir bhai. How are you? It's really unfortunate that the first time we are meeting is virtual.
Yes, but I mean, it's like it's a home setting.
That's
so
true.
So I consider myself invited into your living room.
And I'm invited into yours. Absolutely.
So I won't have to tell you at the end of the conversation, please do come home.
Yes.
You're already here.
The convenience of Zoom.
Yes, convenience of Zoom. Thanks to Zoom. And
yes.
Well, I have for so many years been following your career, listening to your music, read parts of your books, and seen all the fabulous performances that you've done on YouTube. These days, everything is available on YouTube, with or without your permission. It doesn't matter. And of course, everything else that has gone down, whatever run-ins and the fun part of life.
Absolutely.
And so it's really amazing. I mean, I have so much to ask you, and I know that there's a lot to learn from what you have to tell us. And I just wanted to say, first thing is that, or ask you, first thing is, music, is that front and center, or is there elements that move the visual slightly to the left or right as and when necessary?
Well, before I respond, I must first say that it's like talking to a childhood hero. It is talking to a childhood hero.
Now I'm feeling old.
No, I know you are, but I can't not say that. I mean, you're somebody we've looked up to from the time we had an idea of rhythm, idea of sound. You're somebody we have watched and listened to in cassettes initially, and then, of course, live, etc. So thank you very much for having this conversation. It's truly a pleasure and an honor. I mean, your question is yeah, I mean, music is center, I mean, I think in our lives, but I think I just feel that depends on where you're looking at it from, isn't it? So if I am in the center, the music is in the center. And if my position moves, then the view of the music moves, and both are real. I mean, they're probably contesting perceptions, that's possible. But the fact is both are real, and both need to be looked at for hopefully a 360-degree kind of perception of what we are into or what we are in. And I think it's only enriching to have that kind of internal inquiry about it. What are we looking at? What are we singing? Why are we singing? And what is our engagement with it? Because that is life, and that is what we are doing. And how does it move us? How does it move people? Why doesn't it move some people, for example?
Yeah.
And that's also true, isn't it?
That is absolutely true. But, on this beltway, what happens in what is on the periphery and what is front center, which is music, are they related? Are they connected and what I mean is an in-depth connection?
Yes.
As in all your actions and your movements and your thoughts. And
I think it's, everything, I mean, since you asked this directly to me, everything that I do is only because I sing. Otherwise, there's nothing else that matters. My whole worldview comes from the oral perception of life. And that's the only thing I really know. And I think, I believe, and I'd like to say that it's music that has moved me to do whatever I do. And even the difficult things, even things that, put me in awkward situations or in situations which I could probably avoid. And if you look at it in a different perception, it's because of music, because I think we will agree that music transforms us, at least temporarily. When we are deeply inside it, there's something that happens to us that somehow we are maybe for a moment better people, just for a moment better people.
Yes.
And there's that inside. It's very difficult. I know you probably will articulate it better than me. It's that inside opening that happens and everything that defines who we are, or we believe defines who we are, whether it's our sex, our gender, our identity, our nationality, our regional language, whatever, you can add it all on, somehow just kind of dissolve just for that moment. And there is how you're able to breathe in peace in that.
Yes.
And I think that's urges you. That is my urge for everything. Okay. And I want you to talk about it a little bit.
No, I've sometimes
You're asking me too many questions.
Well, I first of all, to echo what you're saying, yes, exactly. It is front and center. Music has been and always will be. Sometimes I feel that, being born at the time I was and around the people that I was with, there may have been a more passive approach built inside of me that did not allow me to be able to really fully experience the multi-layered or multi-dimensional element of the art form. And how it relates to everything else around me, because everything else around me was, everything, fine, and yes, you say this, okay, thank you very much. But in the meantime, why was a question inside my head, but it never really came out and questioned me. Why is it that I'm letting it happen? So, and that's one thing that I always considered was a loss for me. In these later years in my life, there is a conscious effort for me to be able to, put closure to stuff that I let go and I let it pass, and I, did not respond to in a way that I should have, and all those things are there. And at the same time, I also wonder about music, and as you mentioned, it for a moment makes us better people. And that is so true, because are we better people when we are not interacting with the music? And that is something that has always been an issue for me. Wondered about the musician is great and what a saint and what et cetera, but really, is that really so? And would that be something to face, something to understand, and something to come to terms with and grips with and accept as not necessarily a failing in us as human beings, but musicians as human beings, but at the same time understanding that we may be of an enlightened nature when the sa is sung,
Yes, yes,
or the
that's so
tanpura
true.
is tuned, but otherwise we are just human beings with all fallibilities amongst us, and therefore, I mean, my father always, when I saw him, it was what he said was, okay, this is what I'm doing, but don't, if you can, avoid it.
Yes.
Avoid it. And he was very clear as to what his feelings were, and he did not hide it from me. It wasn't like he was away in the night and he would come home and I'd be asleep, so I wouldn't see that persona of him after, being with his buddies and fellow musicians and stuff. But he actually made me a part of it. He actually brought me along, and I actually got to see him and his colleagues in those different shades of gray. And I guess it helped me later on, now that I have analyzed it a little bit more, to understand that I cannot possibly imagine that I am an enlightened being because I play music. I play music, and for those moments, it may be possible to connect to a higher spirit and be there, but not necessarily for the rest of my life. I am just one of those, falling over my face human being.
No, but what you're saying is so beautiful. I mean, truly, because you come from an era and you watched an era where these were not really conversations, I guess, right? Like you said, you immersed yourself in the culture that you were part of, in the art that you were part of, and life went along with that centrality, which was your life breath. And but what is so beautiful about what you said is to be able to recognize that. I mean, I'm truly saying this, to be able to recognize that, yes, there were many things that were happening, and that in some way you have to, you have to have a conversation with it wherever you want in your life. And that's such a beautiful thing, because I think, I include myself, many of us would rather just push that aside and, keep it somewhere locked up in an attic or in the basement. And, and like you said, the persona that is seen or that is received, and that sometimes is in fact crowned on the musician of this infallible spiritual being of a sort, because of the connection that music does. Artists can start believing it. Isn't it true?
This is true. This is absolutely true.
And once you start believing it, there is no getting away from anything. So, so it's what you're saying is so beautiful. I mean, I wish all of us would do that. So that's what I want to say.
It's like hard to get out of that trap. But
yes,
one thing that my father always told me, which I share with all the people that I share music with or guide, because I don't have what you call an official student. I don't. I just have young tabla players who I mentor, and that's it. So, and I always tell them that, my father told me every time that we sat down and talked about music or played music, son, just try to be a good student. Don't try to be a master.
Beautiful.
And you'll get by just fine. And that happens to be the truth. Life is a learning experience from the day you're born until the day you you put to sleep. And so to consider that as a process that then puts you firmly in a designated spot called student.
Correct. And that's applicable for music and beyond, isn't it?
Music and beyond, especially.
Yeah.
And I think that has helped me in many ways to be able to sidestep the trap a few times. Yes, we do all have egos. We all need to have it polished every once in a blue.
Yes.
And you have to have a little bit of an ego to, put yourself on that stage and subject yourself to to actually bearing your heart
Yes.
in front of everybody. I mean, and looking at them and projecting from your face that I know exactly what I'm doing.
Yes.
I got this. I have it covered.
Yeah, I know. And the beautiful aspect of that is those moments when, we would like to believe we are better people, or goodness somehow embodies what is happening, are actually moments when we are not completely in control of what is going on, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We are. In fact, most of the time, we are not in control of what's going on.
Exactly. So that's the whole thing about you wanting to be in control, or being the commander in chief, and pass on that message to the audience. And then the inverse is actually the reality of the flowering of the art, is when you are not in control and you're just a participant in the experience in some way.
Yeah, and there are butterflies in your stomach, but you're not showing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so true that happens. But there is an incredible power and strength in the music itself.
Yeah,
and that in some ways is like, I don't know, like an Indra's flying chariot that puts you in and takes you and moves you forward, and that power in the music for a moment, if it manifests, and it will on stage for a moment or two. We are all entertainers.
Yes.
We can't get on the stage and tell people, now close your eyes and sit and deep breathe and let the music elevate you to a different level. No, we can't do that. They've paid good money to come and watch us play and have us entertain them. So we will. But maybe there will be a moment or two on the stage, within the company we keep on the stage, that magic will arrive.
Yes. Yeah.
And it will only be for a few seconds. And that it will, when it does happen, and everybody is tuned in on it, everybody's on the same wavelength.
Yes.
And the power of music is truly revealed.
True. So true.
And it ties us all together at that time. And not only that, when everybody leaves, you as a musician have now been placed at a pedestal.
Correct.
Much higher than your humanness actually deserves.
Absolutely. And that's where the trouble begins, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's where the trouble begins. It's
But
like...
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, please. No, you have a good thought coming.
I have a question for you, actually. So, and the question is, from this, shall we say, cultural psychology, if we can call that that in some manner. I mean, you're somebody who traveled and shared artistic spaces with musicians of so many different lands and cultures, right? And this process of identity and internalization happens in each culture is different. And it has its own space. It probably has its own hierarchy based on where that artist was placed within that culture and within their perceptions. So my question to you is, when you had those encounters, if you can call them, right? Was it in a way so different from your encounter with, say, your co-inhabitants or people within Hindustani music who you share your stage? And how did you see that difference? This is a different period of time, which is why I'm asking you. How did you see it, and how did you bridge it?
Well, you're always tempted to put that which you represent on an equal footing with what you are encountering, and on that same pedestal. So there is that what should I say, temptation actually to do that. But that everyday mantra pounded in my head by my father, just be a student. You don't need to be a master. And so it was so easy for me to assume the role of the one who has come to be enlightened, as opposed to be the one who is going to be a co-conspirator yeah, and be of that equal importance, because I've been in situations where I've seen musicians basically, I mean, it turns ugly.
Yes,
It gets
I
to
know,
a
I
point
know,
where, like,
I know.
okay, no, I am the one, or no, I am
Yes.
the one, or
Yes.
and it gets worse because then there are the teams of followers
Correct.
who boil it even further.
Absolutely, that's their job.
That's why they are admitted into the house and can stay in the
Yes.
inner circle, because they are able to polish that ego to a point
Yes.
where the maestro would feel, okay, I am right. It's not the maestro's fault. It's just that human fallibility of being. Of becoming, like you mentioned earlier, just believing, starting to believe that, and so that's has always been my approach, is to be able to arrive wanting to know, as opposed to wanting to tell.
Correct.
And when you do that, and without waiting for the other person to assume that role,
yes,
it first of all, it relieves you from the responsibility of having to be bigger than you actually can be.
Yeah.
And allows the other person the comfort of being able to be the first to give.
Correct. Correct.
And therefore feel in that manner the initiator of the good that has begun amongst us. So keeping that in mind has always been very important to me, and it has taught me a lot, whether I've played with John McLaughlin, or whether I've played with Charles Lloyd or Herbie Hancock, or when I was playing with Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab, or Amjad Ali Bhai, or Balachandra ji.
Yes.
I played with Balachandra ji in 1971.
Wow.
I was 18, 19 years old.
I wasn't born.
You weren't born yet. I mean, you weren't even considered yet.
Considered, yes. I was not even in the horizon at that point of time.
No. And it was so amazing to watch him. And his Mridangam player didn't come.
Okay.
We were in Canada. Okay. And I arrived there to play with Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab. And then it was so, such generosity on his part to, rather than just sit there and play the 72 Mela Kratas, he actually told me that I should play with him. And then he did this whole big lecture about me and how it has, it was like I was made to feel so welcome and so part of the goings on of the proceedings, that that comfort that there's somebody that has put his arm around me, and in doing so has brought me into that chariot, and I can now fly with him and feel for that one moment a part of something heavenly happening. And
that's the whole idea of sharing in whatever manner when art happens. And like you said, the whole attitude that you are learning changes the entire dynamic of any relationship to that extent, right? In a way, whether it is in music or outside music. I mean, we always talk about music, but we rarely talk about listening. And what we are discussing is actually being able to listen. And I think listen embodies a certain amount of quietness and humility to actually pay attention. And art is all about paying attention. If you,
absolutely,
it's about acutely being attentive, and in the most humble manner, because you do realize that something is growing and developing at that moment, and you're just watching it and you're learning from it, and there's a sharing that is happening between the artists. It's so beautiful because I think it also, in a way, dismantles hierarchies at that point, irrespective of whether you are more powerful at that moment or your colleague is more powerful, irrespective of that. It dismantles that. And you're actually able to have that connection and able to grow. It's so beautiful because most of the times, because of who we are as human beings, that's very difficult to
Yes,
happen.
it is true.
And the audience may not realize it. It's possible people watching it may not even know. But the fact is that there is a certain ugliness that sometimes comes into the entire happening. Like you said, there could be a fight happening, and people encouraging the fight from the wings, so to speak. And but it's, in a way, you touched upon the question that we're also asking, that we believe, for example, art or music specifically, actually, is transcending. That somewhere, somehow, it is borderless and border in its multi-dimensions and not necessarily political lines. But I think what we are discussing, what you pointed to, is an important aspect, is that it also begins with the attitude of the individual or the individuals or the artists. Yes. And that transcending happens only when there is that urge to learn.
Yes,
that urge
absolutely.
to learn. And I think that's true also of the listener, for example, because even the listener needs to have that urge to learn, to receive. So there's a certain openness that needs to embody the individuals who are the artists, the musicians, and then something happens and it transcends, and then it does, and then doesn't matter, and then there is a connection. So I think we rarely speak about that quality. We just think that it happens, boom, that artists get together and we are now crossing borders, but that really is not true, is it?
That doesn't happen easily. It's so easily. I just want to relate one thing. I was 16 years old, and and really totally full of myself.
Okay.
Because I was 14, 15 and playing concerts and was the darling of the crowd, young, and I was playing with people like Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma, V.G. Chok ji, and Hari Prasad ji, and quite a few like Birju Maharaj ji and all those guys when I was 14 or 15 years old. So I was totally full of myself because I was being applauded and all that. So okay, I'm doing great, I'm doing right, I'm doing this. And for that moment, what my father had been putting that mantra in my head was like put aside for a while. Like I said, once in a while, I'm able to avoid the trap. This time I wasn't able to avoid the trap. So I was asked to do 4 concerts with Pandit Ravi Shankar ji. I was 16. My father was busy doing music for a film. A Bollywood film. So he couldn't go. So I was asked to go. Raviji said, you come along. So I went and I played 1 concert with him. I thought it went very well. Fantastic. People applauded. And whatever I did, it was like big deal. And next day we took a flight to, I think, Bangalore from Bombay. And I was sitting next to him. In those days, there was this Dakota plane.
Correct.
And you said there was no first class or economy. It was just all one. And we were sitting together. And I was waiting for him to say, oh, this was great. Yesterday was good. You did fine. Nothing came. And I was just like, what happened here? And then next day after that, we played in Bangalore. And I thought it went very well. Chaudhaya Hall was packed and we had a great concert. And then next day we flew from Bangalore to Cochin. It was Cochin then days. And nothing, no word from him, nothing. And I'm like getting very agitated and very like, I can't hold myself back.
You're looking for affirmation.
I'm looking for, all that, because I thought it all went so well. Yeah. And so I built up my courage and I say, uncle, I called him uncle. Concert was good yesterday, wasn't it? It kind of like casual. And he looked at me and said, yeah, it was okay. And then he went back to his readings. And then he saw me that I was a little, not too comfortable. So then he put his book down and he looked at me and said, Zakir, do you remember the kurta I was wearing, which color it was? And I didn't. He said, do you remember the composition that I played? In Teen Tall, 16 beats, I didn't. But I remembered everything that I had done.
You played, yeah.
I remembered everything that I had played and all the applause that came with it and stuff.
Correct.
I hadn't. And so then he looked at me and said, Zakir, age aside, I'm older and you're younger, but we are having a conversation on stage together. Shouldn't you be looking at me and interacting with me, as opposed to sitting and facing the audience and pointing to 3 or 4 of those people who are like connected with you, and then you just play for them? And I said, yeah, he's right. I mean, I couldn't think of anything that he had done, and I suddenly realized that I wasn't paying attention, that I wasn't listening, and that had a lot to do that I wasn't watching him and looking at him. There was no eye contact. So he said to me, why don't you, in this concert at Kochi tonight, sit at an angle and watch me, and let's see what happens. So I did that, and I tell you, the whole perspective of how the music was arrived at and that conversation, it just changed. It's so changed. And it reminded me of another story that I had read in a book. This young actor in Hollywood had just had a release of a film. And the tradition was that the big studio houses, the big kahuna would have a party and play the movie and for the invitees. So that happened. And then all the actors and senior people were congratulating this young man, oh, you did well and all that. But there was one guy who was sitting in the corner, didn't say anything, didn't even look at him. So the young man went up to him and said, Mr. Chaplin, did you enjoy the film? And Mr. Chaplin, who was from a silent film era, looked up at him and said, young man, don't just wait there to say your lines. Learn to listen.
Ah, beautiful.
It was an immediate, if you're listening, the way you will speak your line back will be way different than what you've already planned to speak it as, because you must react. You must react to what's coming at you. So so that happened, and I learned a big lesson there from Ravi Shankarji, and I have thank him every day because that changed the way I play and I look at music, and I look at working with people. I have strayed a lot, but from what we were talking about. But
no, it's simple. No, you haven't actually, because you pointed at something that seems you said it in passing about Raviji asking you to just turn your position, right? I mean, it's I'll tell you why it really strikes me really deeply is because about maybe 7-8 years ago, as a singer, you're so used to center stage. I mean, it's like you're in and you know how it is in Carnatic music, you're center stage. On my right is the violin, who is, looking like this way at us. The mridangam is here, and Ghatam or Ganjira is seated behind, almost hidden, right? Yeah. That's the traditional setup. And
now, one question before you go any further. The mridangam plays on your left because he's left-handed?
I mean, if he is left-handed, sorry, you can flip it. Sorry, you got it right. Sorry, I got the directions wrong. The violin could be either way, depending on whether the mridangam is right-handed or left-handed. But the Ghatam or Ganjira artist is usually pretty hidden. Hardly seen. That's the truth. And I think it was about 7, 8, maybe 10 years ago, just before I went to a concert, I just thought, why don't we sit differently? And I told my colleagues, can we sit differently? So I said, how? I said, let's sit like a jazz quartet. Okay. So I am not center. I'm right of center. The violin is probably left of center. And we kind of sit the C. And first of all, it was a revelation on how uncomfortable I was. I was so used to being the center person, looking at everybody, and in a way felt I was in charge. It was about a power position. And by just moving my position just a wee bit, I felt there was a loss of that control. It was revealing for me to see how much I felt I'd lost control. But then through half an hour, 40 minutes, the sharing was entirely different. Just the nature of our relationship on the stage changed. And it changed for everybody. The Ghatam artist was out there and everybody was looking at each other. So, what you're pointing at is also the fact that the relationship, it matters on how we are in position with each other, not just physically, but metaphorically as people.
Exactly.
And sharing is also that positionality to a large extent, isn't it? And that dynamic changes how you listen, or whether you listen at all. For example, do I really listen to the guttam artist seated behind unless he or she is playing a solo? I don't.
Yeah, you don't.
Because I think that they are periphery.
Yeah.
And at some point of time, I may think they are in fact infringing upon something that is happening in front stage.
Okay.
So, so this the egos and where we keep ourselves also directs the way we feel about each other. We listen to each other. So I think that little point that you made of just turning and watching and listening, and also it also, I think, made you not just look at the audience as being the only person that you're paying attention to. But there's something happening over here. It is the same.
Yes, exactly. And that's something that brings me back to, we were talking about, any kind of music.
Yeah.
And how it is that we can all come together. And is there a way of thinking, or way of looking at things, or so on? For me, it's a mindset.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an Indian classical musician, at my core.
Yes.
But when I'm going to go and play with Herbie Hancock, I'm not going to impose that part of me in the proceedings.
Correct.
I'm going to be a percussionist.
Yeah.
I have my instrument there, but now I'm going to not say that I'm only going to play teen tal, and I'm only going to play these repertoire thing in this 4/4 cycle composition. So no, now I'm going to just use my instrument as a percussion instrument, and I'm going to do whatever needs to be done on it to be able to be part of this conversation that's taking place. So it's a mindset. So I've run into situations where I have had great musicians sitting. Once Kishori Amonkarji, the great singer, and this Alain Zeffil, what should I say, a baritone in France, they were supposed to interact together and do this music of Michel Carpentier from 15th, 16th century. Okay. So she's going to do what she does, and he's going to do what he does. But it was supposed to work together because the idea of choosing the compositions were that they were saying the same things.
Correct.
Okay. So now, before the compositions were chosen, Alain sang this one little couplet. And the first thing Kishori ji said, "Oh, that's Vrindavani Sarang, isn't it?" Okay, so now already the fence is moving.
Absolutely, already
rearranged.
Completely. Yeah.
So there's no way you're going to get out of Vrindavani Sarang.
That's what
you're going to want to keep everything there.
Yes.
So that mindset does not allow us to be able to just, step into a situation comfortably enough to be ourselves in a way that someone else sees us to be. And it never occurs to us, why not be that way?
Correct.
Maybe that will spark an interaction or a conversation that would be beneficial and fruitful to all of us.
Absolutely.
Maybe something new will occur. Maybe something fabulous will happen, and the music in its strength and in its power will in some ways hold us together in this bouquet that's going to be of immense color and beauty and perfume.
And there's also a fundamental question that's being asked: why are we doing this? I mean, if we are going to build walls around or dictate rules, then why are we even having this conversation?
Exactly. Why come with preconceived ideas?
Absolutely.
In place?
I remember, Zakir Bhai, the first time we did this collaboration with the Jogapas. The Jogapas are a transgender community who live in the borders of Maharashtra and Karnataka.
Yeah.
And they sing Bhakti Sangeet. Yeah. And so the idea was, could we do a collaboration? Could we do some music together?
Yeah.
And, the first thing I learned was exactly that from them. We met, I think it was in Bangalore, we met for the first time. And you had these people who were just there to share. And you say, I didn't know much about the music that they sing. I knew vaguely. So there were some Jogopas who sang in Marathi, some of them sang in Kannada. And I'm singing, I'm going there as a Carnatic musician or whatever that's supposed to mean. But and then we start singing. And the first thing that I felt was the idea is to, this is what we give and this is what we share, and let's just share and let's just listen and let's just find avenues of conversation and musical conversation. I think an intrinsic part also in that exchange is that you don't need to agree upon everything, right?
Yes.
We don't have to be completely in sync and, whatever. There could be things that are sonically different and they can play out. But the moment I listen to them and say, oh, this is Raga Mohanam, this is Raga something. And therefore I am then then automatically I am deciding what the nature of the conversation should be. And there's a complete inability to say that that's a sound, this is a sound, and let them just come together in some manner. And like you said, the perfume of what happens could be something that either one of us did not even imagine, isn't it?
Yes.
So, and also the quality of the art itself, because we're talking about transcending, the quality of the sound also changes. Because somewhere I think people receiving it also, because people don't listen to just sound. It comes through an experience of emotions, an experience of so many other things, their own experiences of life too. So in fact, sound is received through layers of experience coming from the artist and the individual. When you receive it, or you cry, or you laugh, or you feel indifferent, whatever it may be. And I think, like you pointed, the attitude is also being transferred. I mean, the smile is being transferred. The laughter is being transferred. So
there's a visual component.
Yes, the music is coming through all that, and it's communicated through all that, and and I think that shows in what when people truly come to you and say, "I have no words today to say." I think what they really mean is they felt that deep connection that was enabled. Isn't it true?
Yes, it's true. And they are expressing their feeling as opposed to speaking words.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. That's true. And I think even us artists, sometimes after a concert, don't want to speak. We have nothing to say. You did wonderful, you played beautifully, or you sang. You don't want to say that.
No. In fact, it's a good idea not to. I feel it's better to talk about, okay, where are we going to have dinner?
Yes, that's true. Just break it and move ahead. That's so true. That's so true.
Yeah, it's important to keep those special moments very special for those times, and you come back to it, because you can never repeat it.
Yeah.
It will never be. It can never happen that way again. So why even try to grab it and put it somewhere in, it's like buying a pair of shoes, and it's a very bad analogy, but and then wearing it to that, and now the sole's broken, everything's gone, but you still want to grab onto it, because when you first wore it, it was the most comfortable thing in your life. So having said all that, this is something about crossing bridges. I think we touched on it at one time.
Yes.
And I'm wondering that when you say the Jagopas and how you crossed over to meet up with them and create this connection with them, do you find that that action has been equally returned?
Well, I think, I mean, I would inverse it actually and say I should be asking, was it returned from me? That's what I would ask primarily first of myself. Because, I mean, there are complexities also, and I think you also touched upon it briefly, is that the inequality that exists between the participants is a life reality. And now in this case, the Jogopas are marginalized. They are a community of trans people who are marginalized in society. So I come from immense power, which is socially driven, aesthetically driven, culturally driven, right? So the conversation itself becomes complicated. It's not as simple. And I think that there we go back to, what am I going into with the conversation with? Am I listening? Am I still a student, like your father said? Or am I going there to say, oh, I'm here, this great musician who wants to come there, and this conversation is uplifting somebody? Am I having a savior complex, for example? You know, I think these are important things that I have to ask myself, because I'm also learning. I mean, I don't claim to have be evolved in any manner, but I think that what I learned is, yes, it is reciprocated when we are truly coming with that attitude. That also it shows in the way you sing or in the way you play. It shows in the sound that comes out of the tabla. It shows in the articulation in my voice, because my attitude is in my tonality. You know, it is there in the tonality, and I think that is sensed. And I would like to believe, and actually this is a question they should be answering, but I'd like to believe that we began a conversation and we continue a conversation that is that glimpses upon equality, if I can even say that glimpses upon it. And I think we all know that it is difficult. We all know that it is not easy. But I think that honesty is there. And I'd like to, as long as that stays alive, I'd like to believe that there's something precious that can happen out of it. And when that's lost, and then, you know, and of course we are performing to an audience, there is that, they are getting entertained. Nobody's denying that reality also. But I think that attitude is so important. But I want to ask you one more question, is because at some point did both of us in this conversation take for granted that crossing bridges or crossing boundaries, whether it, you know, is something that should happen, that an artist, as a musician, you should always do? Or when does a musician get to a point in their own music, if I can use that, where the inwardness results in an open outwardness? Is that also an important question?
Well, I think music as a universal entity resides in all of us. It resides in all of us. The question is whether we recognize it to be so. Is that universe that is in the music that we are connected to only confined to the tradition that we represent? So for me, that has never been the case. I was lucky. One thing that my father did, I have to say, maybe he was a forward-thinking teacher, or I don't know what it was.
I'm sure he was.
He never made me think that I was tackling something Himalayan. It was never like, oh, you have to play Na for 15 years, 10 hours a day, then maybe you'll have the correct tone.
Yes.
There was no such thing like that. It was just come and be a part of this and do what I'm doing and have fun doing it. At the same time, there was no regimen.
Correct.
It was not like I had to get up in the morning and take a bath and then sit down with my instrument and play for 5 hours a day every day. No, it wasn't like that. It was connect with it whenever you please. Connect with it when the mood and the feeling is upon you. And so I was left to find my way in that world, and also to make my friendship and relationship with the spirit in that instrument.
Correct.
So it wasn't like I was being drilled that just play it this way and this way and this way. No, it was, here's this, now go, live with your instrument and see how you transpose it onto that. How do you find a way to tell that story?
Yeah.
So that was a very, very important lesson. that I learned from him. So I've never felt that that the music in any way is something that is not my friend. That it is, it is Lord Krishna, and yes, and it is Ustad Allah Rakha, and it is great Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Sahab and all that. It's all there. But at the same time, that music, that person, that spirit is a dear friend. Yeah. It's a person I can hang out with and have fun with and really enjoy being with. It's a playpen that I enjoy being in. So that is a very important lesson that I first learned. And okay, so there was another part to your question.
My question was about, can I respond to what you said first? Because you said something that I would like to respond to. Because I think what your father did was quite spectacular, because in the classical traditions of India, we tend to see the art form as something that is actually distant, something that needs to be attained, either
to be worthy of.
Exactly, to worthy of. So in a way, you're already placing the music somewhere up there, and, so there is no reality in that, in some sense, right? But when you invert it like your father did and say it's real, it's a friend, it's somebody that you have to just have a relationship with, have a conversation with, disagree with, everything.
Yeah.
Then I think it's quite beautiful what happens to your relationship with not only that instrument or your school or your music, but the perception of music itself is then driven by this friendship. Yes. And then automatically, in some manner, it is not limited by only that music, right?
No, it's not.
So an opening that your father gave was not just with the tabla, but with the fact that music is something that you are with and you can be with, which means you can be with any music, with any person, with any sound. Yeah, I think that's a very important lesson.
And see that strain of happiness and fun and joy in it. Yeah. And because that's what it's supposed to be. If you're not enjoying it, why are you doing it?
Exactly, and also, and when you share the stage, the other person also needs to enjoy it. So in the stage is a place of vulnerability, fearlessness, and compassion. And if there is not a combination of all these qualities, then there is no sharing really that is happening. My question, I'm going to try and end with that. My question to you, which this latter part, was, is there, once this is instilled, shall we say, in a student of music, a perpetual student of music, then the way you answered it, so just correct me if I'm wrong, is that then the time to, shall we say, widen your stage of music or your sharing with various cultures, that automatically unfolds, right? You don't choose
it. Automatically unfolds.
Right? You don't say, now I'm going to have collaboration with X.
No, it doesn't have to be that way. It is a natural flow. And it has a lot to do with who you are interacting with.
Yeah.
It's like if I'm going to play with you, I have to get to know you.
Yeah.
I have to know what you like, what you eat, what you drink, your family, your kids, everything, and get to understand you as a complete package. Then I'm able to interact with you, because then that emotional element that is between all of us and how that actually is one layer of the conversation of music. Then it becomes an intimacy to be enjoyed, to be loved, to have, to be elated with and fly with to a different level of awareness. And so that, of course, is a very important thing. And then because of this kind of openness, for me to be able to just enjoy my music and have fun with it. And in the environment that I grew up, watching my father recording film music, recording with Buddy Rich, a great jazz drummer, or Yusef Lateef, the great jazz flautist, and so on, and as well, and working with Lata ji or Asha ji or Rafi Saab and all that. So it was not just na din din na din din all the time. It was adha, and it was bongos and congos and drums and everything. So it was and he allowed me to experience all of that. And then I would come home and then transpose all of that onto, and talk with my friend, the tabla, about it and say, and so that development allowed me to be able to approach the music in a much more universal manner than just thinking that the universe was Indian classical music.
Exactly. I think that's so true. That having that ability to expose yourself and to receive, and I think when it's done young, it's done without even consciousness, right? When you get older, then you are already judging, perceiving, and you have an inability to be that receiver. I think, but whether it is any kind of sounds within India or across the globe or across cultures, I think what this conversation has hinted upon is that music does transcend, music can transcend, music will transcend, but I guess musicians need to first transcend. Would that be a good way to end?
Yeah, that is a very good way to end.
Okay. Thank you so much, Zakir Bhai. I can't tell you what an honor this has been, honestly.
It is a great lesson learned today. Thank you very much. And I think Reena ji might have something to add.
Okay.
It's great to see you, Reena ji.
Thank you so much, Zakir Bhai. This was a riveting conversation. I think not only just the creation of music, the whole process of receiving and listening is so instrumental in our own growth and in unifying us with our own selves and therefore emanating it out to the world. Thank you so much. And for me, your stage came alive. I could just visualize all of you there, interacting, producing, creating, and sending out vibes in order to really bring all of us together. Thank you so much for your music, both Zakir Bhai.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to finally meet with him.
I was just going to say thank you. He always beats me to it. So,
so we have a few questions for the both of you, if I may start shooting them off.
Go ahead.
So we have one, either of you could, decide to take this on. This is from Medha Rajadhyaksha. She is a student of music herself. She says, do you think Hindustani and Carnatic musicians know enough about each other's music? Some observers feel that most of the fusion on offer today are gimmicky and not the result of thoughtful collaboration or the immersion of two sides in each other's genres. Your thoughts?
Zakir Bhai, you go.
No, you go first.
No, you go.
Uttam Gana, Madham Bhajana.
Purani baat hai.
No, I would love to hear your thoughts and I'll expand on it if need be.
No, I wanted to listen to what Zakir Bhai said. I mean, we're making a blanket statement, so we need to be a little careful about generalizing the point. I think there have been some wonderful collaborations. There have been wonderful musical conversations that with Ravi ji, with Zakir Bhai, with many people that I have seen as a growing student and watching and in admiration. But it's also true, there is some truth to what was said, that exceptions kept aside of musicians, I think the amount of involvement that each of these forms have with the other is limited to a large extent. Now, if I put it very simply, from the Carnatic ear, if I was going to speak from the Carnatic ear, the Carnatic ear has limited perceptions of the idea of what a raga is in the Hindustani world or in the Khyal world. Okay. And it is limited by a certain preconceived notion of the raga that comes from the system, right? And if you look at, for example, most collaborations go back to the same ragas that have been sung together for the last 50 years. That automatically says something that we are not building connections that are deeper, when there is a possibility for deeper connections.
Yes.
I think that is true. And it's also true of rhythm, for example. I think that most Carnatic Mridangam artists do not understand the layakari of the system of tabla, right? Or from the other region also. I mean, Zakir Bhai is better to speak from the other side, but I know that the perception of Mridangam being about mathematical calculations, or being about arithmetic progressions, or being about, as we would say in Tamil, kanakku, or just arithmetic, is also a false notion, right? And to some extent, I think both parties are to take responsibility for this limited idea. you know. So I think there is truth to it. There is truth to it, but there are also exceptions, and maybe we can learn from those exceptions, is what I would say. Because I want to now point to actually Zakir Bhai, because I have seen Zakir Bhai play and in collaborations, and and you actually see the connections that are possible beyond these limited perceptions. This in terms of ideas of seven. How does one conceive, for example, of ideas seven? I remember, I think, at the academy when he played Mishra. I don't know whether you remember it. I think it was T.K. Murthy sir's 80th birthday or something. I don't remember. Yeah. I was there, and I remember what he did with seven. Now, that was not part of a Carnatic system or tabla playing. It was not part of that. It was a conceptual idea that was being shared. To get there, you must be willing to immerse yourself in what you initially think of the other. And I think there is a lot that needs to happen. I think there needs to be deeper conversations. That's my opinion.
Yes, it's true. And then, as I was saying earlier, you've got to take the time to be able to get to know the people on so many levels that it's necessary, and then spend some time. I mean, what happens in a concert these days of a Carnatic artist or a Hindustani classical artist is you meet in the dressing room. And then you say, okay, what are we going to do? Okay, we all know Mohanam, so we're going to do that. You know, exactly, it's fine. We know Hansadwani, so then we'll just do that. So then every time these interactions happen, you hear these 3 or 4 ragas, as Krishna Bhaiya pointed out. So time hasn't been given, or time hasn't been spent to do this. And at the same time, there's nothing holding a musician from Hindustani music and from Carnatic music to just call each other, to speak on the phone.
Yes.
And in this day and age, FaceTime and discuss about one's dislikes and likes and which ragas and that ragas. And what about, Janasa Mohini, or what about some other ragas? And let's try to find a way to be able to interact in that manner. And how do you do the Badhant in this raga? And how do we do it? And is there a way to be able to, we don't spend time together. We don't make an effort to get to know each other. This is a very important element of being able to interact and go forward. And when you talk about gimmicks, artists in general, you have to realize one thing, that there is A, B, C, D, all the way down to Z, in America, Z, that you're supposed to do in music. And in that, there is ragam, there is thanam, there is pallavi, there is mathematics, there is farans, there is everything. There's a whole lot of stuff there. All those have to be displayed in a concert. Now, if certain elements that stand out for the audience are the frantic ones. They stand out, this person playing fast, that person playing fast, them playing fast together, that stands out. And then for some students like Medha and maybe Medha's mentor or teacher, that is more like, oh, that's all gimmickry. Okay, so the teacher has said so the student has to believe so. But is that really the fact? It's just that all that is part of the music, part and parcel. The question is, have you aesthetically put together the quantities of all those elements so that one doesn't stand out more than the other? So this, keeping in mind, is very important. To blame the artists would not necessarily be all the way true. Yes, they don't take the time to be able to get to know each other better, but at the same time, they are maybe busy and they get thrown at the last minute to go play a concert. So they only have the tried and true, and they just do that. So I feel that this word gimmickry has been utilized a lot by connoisseurs, people who come from a way of life that is very important to them because they are something in that way of life. They have a status. Now, when in today's world, if it's not what they can talk about, their status has diminished. And so it's important for them to say, oh, the way we used to do it, or the way that maestro did it, and da-da-da-da, and da-da-da-dee. music evolves, music changes, music moves, music finds different phraseology from one generation to the next generation to the next generation. And so that's one of the things that Hindustani classical music has. Be true to the tradition, we are told, but at the same time, be new every time, be fresh every time, be creative every time. There's a contradiction in here. So, I mean, how do you do that without actually taking from what you've heard and seen and recognized the sameness in what you have, and then how to color what you have in that particular idea that's out there and make it, therefore, even more open and ready for question by someone else and to take forward by someone else. So this is where we need to be, I guess.
Can I just add something to that?
Yes, Krishna.
I think what is most important for an artist to be is honest. Whether you dislike something or like something is entirely independent of that. The artist is honest. Artist is giving you what the artist feels. You're most welcome to dislike it. But I think that as long as you see honesty, I think you have to accept it as another way of looking at things.
Exactly.
As simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, Krishnaji, you mentioned Khayal, because the next question we have from Chetan Mathur. He says, Hindustani music, this question is for you, Zakir Bhai. Hindustani music, which includes Khayal and Drupad, represents a wonderful merging of Hindu, Hindustani and Islamic cultures.
Yes.
What is Khayal's and Drupad's future in India?
I think the future is bright. I mean, I think there is definitely a much deeper bench strength, if you will, in Indian music now than there was before. I mean, you can have 10 or 15 really amazing singers, 10 or 15 great instrumentalists, 10 or 15 great tabla players, and so on and so forth. And they are all one better than the other, or if that is the word. I mean, there's no better and there's no bad. It's just different. So I feel that the music is evolving. Today's young Indian musician, I mean, when we were learning music, when we were young, I mean, we had what was available to us then. I was lucky. I went to the film recordings and heard more than just rag and tal. But most musicians of an ustad's family and stuff, they just practiced at home and did whatever they were told to do, and that was it. And then when I arrived in the Western world, I had to relearn everything. I had to learn everything from them and then try to find how this all will fit and work together. So that today's young Indian musicians, they grow up with everything right there in front of them. And so if they're learning Chandrakons, they have a way to be able to tie it to a jazz composition that may have the same mode, and how that mode has been utilized in that way. And so they grow up learning not only the North Indian classical way of being able to express Rag Marwa or express Bhopali or Malkons or anything, but also what else is out there that enhances that expression and therefore that experience. And they grow up with this mindset where they can wear different hats and be equally comfortable in each one of them, whether it's Niladri or it's Purbayan or it's Sabir or it's Aman and Ayan or anybody. They are all Kaushiki, and I mean, you name it, Rashid Bhai and so on. There's so many great young musicians who are equally comfortable singing a Bollywood film song or doing a bhajan record or performing some Coke unplugged pop thing. And you see them doing all. Shankar Mahadevan is a great example of all that. So there are these young musicians of today who are really, they have created an interesting look in to the way our music has evolved and is evolving. And so I see that Khayal and Drupad, by the way, there is a resurgence of Drupad happening
Yes.
in North India. So that's
Yes.
an amazing thing. And young people are responsible for that. So there is an understanding. You learn, you get involved in it, you want to find out more. How do you find out more? You reach back there and you see, that's what it is. So I see a bright future for the art form. I see longevity. I see that it's not going to in any way, classical music will never go away, whether it's Western classical music or Indian classical music or anything. It will always be there because you have to know it in order to be able to be a rock star. You have to know it in order to be able to be a great film singer or a ghazal singer or whatever. You have to know it. You have to do it. So it's always there. Now, today's ghazal singer and today's pop singer and all, they are realizing that they can, in some ways, experience the art form in its traditional form and be able to actually partake. And that's a great thing, I think.
That's such an elevating thought. Thank you, Zakir Bhai. And when you're talking about futures, there's a question from Balakrishnan for Krishnaji. Would you agree that throughout the history, Hindustani and Carnatic music have been patronized mainly by the elite? What needs to be done to widen the audience of these genres?
Well, any art form that uses the tag classical, that's a tag I prefer not to use, very honestly speaking. I prefer just call the art form by the name that it embodies. That's it. Because classical comes with either a feeling of superiority or a feeling of intimidation, depending on who you are and where you belong. But any of these art forms that we tag as classical, and I have to now, before I go, tell you one little, there was this musicologist by name Harold Powers. He lived he was in Princeton. And he was a dear friend of mine towards the end of his life. And I remember he came home for a cup of coffee one day and we were having a chat. And this was many, many years ago, before I even started reading and learning about society. And I casually asked him, Harold, what's the difference between folk and classical? And he looked at me and said, very simple, an art form moves up the ladder of society. It moves from folk to classical. And, I had never heard anybody tell me that, being from the world of the classical, right? And that really opened my eyes. So it's true that these art forms have been traditionally patronized by the elite everywhere. This is not an Indian phenomenon. This is true across the globe. It's the courts, it's the rich, it is the socially privileged. These are the people who have, shall we say, patronized, participated in these art forms. And there's also no doubt that there needs to be concerted action so that these art forms move to a larger spectrum of people. Now, there's a lot that needs to be done, which means, going back to our conversation, it needs to come with the attitude change of the artists. The important thing is that why do we want to share this to a larger spectrum of people? Not because we are doing them a favor, we're doing ourselves a favor. I think that's something we should realize. They cannot come from a position of condescension that, you people don't have this great art form and presume and ignore the cultures that they have, whoever they may be. But it must say, we want you to be part of this idea of music. We want you to add dimensions to this idea of music that we haven't added. I think that is required, and which means it needs to be in the way right from the younger age, which also means that, like Zakir Bhai said, that the artists within this classical world must also be willing to receive from across. You can't just say, I want to give this and you will not receive. You should also be willing to receive sounds and melodies and possibilities. And, I have to think of Kumarji in this context. Such an important person in this conversation that we are having. Yes. Because he received. He found a new place for the sounds that he heard. And so therefore, that ability to be humble about what you sing and to realize that it needs to go to a lot of people because you want it to be more beautiful, and also you see beauty everywhere. I think if we can get that quality into any action that we do, which means I think spaces need to change. Music cannot only be performed, these art forms, in proscenium stages. I believe they have to be on the streets. They have to rub shoulders with the sounds that we hear on the streets. They have to rub shoulders with everything else that is real. So we have to think of, I would say subverting stages, subverting the idea of space, idea of belonging, idea of ownership. Are we willing to give up ownership? That's the question we should ask ourselves. Because if we say this music belongs to everybody, everybody owns it. And then I think there have been exceptions of people who have also been able to do this. But I do think there needs to be some concerted action that we all put in, so that we want these art forms to truly, shall we say, breathe the space which it inhabits today, not something that exists 150 years ago or 200 years ago.
Very, very thoughtful. I think we are taking away a lot of very interesting ideas from your conversation.
Yes.
So one last question to both of you, if you can just, in a sense, summarize what would you consider the 2 or 3 main elements of music that can be considered a unifying force at the global music, and how does Indian music contribute to this globalizing force?
Zakir, I'm going to let you answer that, and we will.
Oh, no.
Yes, no, you go. I'm not taking that.
How does Indian music, what was the second part of your question?
How does Indian music contribute to this globalizing force? Unifying force, let's take it.
First of all, I think we have to try and rid ourselves with the idea that we are doing fusion music, with the idea that we are globalizing something. Who are we to do that? I mean, really, it's really, this globalizing or fusion. When we had a group called Shakti with John McLaughlin in 1976, we had our first record called Shakti. Okay, so we brought the master tape to the offices of Clive Davis, the CBS honcho, the head honcho, and handed it over. And he said, "Oh, great, thank you very much. Okay, so the release date will be et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, what do we call this? Because it's a Shakti. No. What kind of music is this?" The man asked. And John looked at me, I looked at Shankar, and we don't know what it's music. That's all it is. We never thought of we were playing Indian or jazz or whatever. We were just playing together, and this is what happened. And so here it is, it's music. Clive Davis says, but my PR team needs to know what to classify it as, because we need to put it in a particular bin in a record store. So we have to call it something. Now, in those days, there was no world music, no new age, no fusion, nothing at that time. And so we didn't know what to call it. We said, call it whatever you want to. As far as we are concerned, it's just music. So the fact is, all these labels that have arrived, they have arrived because there is somebody up there in those buildings, in offices in the penthouse corner office, who wants to label it something so that they can sell it, so that they can market it. So whether, music for all of us, all musicians, is music. And that's what it should be. So when you're talking about globalization, it already exists. You're talking about Khayal and Drupad. How did Khayal emerge? Amir Khusro took Prabandh Gayaki, Haveli Sangeet, and Sufiana Kalam, Kaul Kalbana, and somehow found a way to be able to make all that kind of work together and called it Khayal. And Khayal emerged. So it's as you said, a secular form. It's a form of music that glorifies both Hindu and Muslim culture, and and so on and so forth. Harold said, when music is moved from, say, from the street to Royal Festival Hall, it becomes classical music. So globalization of music is something that is a term that is utilized by the powers that be, that need to keep track of the dollars and cents and rupees and pounds and euros. And that's where it comes from. It doesn't come from musicians. Musicians are musicians, and they play music together. And Indian classical music has been a form of music that because of its improvising nature, allows for it to be able to wear any garb comfortably, to fit into any conversation, musical conversation easily. And most Indian musicians, if the mindset is that way, where it's open, are able to adapt more freely than, say, a Western classical music, a musician who's trained in a certain way. So Indian music is part of the conversation more so than other forms of music, barring African music. And so it is a great thing that this is happening. John Coltrane in 1960, one of the great jazz musicians, met Ravi Shankar ji and wanted to learn. George Harrison did, John McLaughlin did, Charles Lloyd did, Herbie Hancock, so many great musicians. So we are all students at heart, and we are all students in practice. And it's our thirst to be able to speak and tell the story that we know in as many words, in as many languages as possible, so that we can expand our horizon. That brings us to places where we can learn something. George Harrison sold millions of records. He really did to Ravi Shankar ji, but he did it because he felt that he needed to expand the way he thought about music. He needed to, get his mind opened up. So he did, in spite of being such an incredible success. Student at heart, whether there's Bela Fleck or Edgar Meyer or Herbie or Miles or anybody, same thing. So musicians are students at heart, and they know music to be this language which is speakable, which it can be used to tell stories, talk, make conversations, joke, be happy with, get serious with, etc., etc., etc. Globalization, let's leave things of Caesar to Caesar or whatever is being said.
On that, sorry.
No, I have not much. I think I just want to say that, I completely agree with Zakir Bhai that the tags are given for various reasons. And I think all musicians should do is not believe that they are the tag. Just remember that you're not the tag. You're here for music. And the takeaway to sharing or transcending is, I think, being the crux of the conversation, which is, can you listen? Can you always be a student? And I think with that in place, it doesn't matter whether it is local or global. Those are just words. I think music will flow.
Yes, absolutely.
And
so go with the flow.
Thank you, Zakir ji and Krishna ji, for a very enriching and inspiring conversation. Truly music to our ears. Our sincere gratitude to our partner JSW for their support of the Anil Dharker Literature Live Independence Lectures. I'd like to thank the Bangalore International Centre too, who joined hands with us this year. Our annual Tata Literature Live, the Mumbai Lit Fest, will be held online from 18th to 21st November 2021. So do watch out for the announcements on our website and our social media platforms. Till we meet again, stay safe and a very happy Independence Day.